All right, it is December 12th, and I'm sitting here talking with Jim Fite at his house on Walter Avenue. So tell me a little bit about how you started working at the shipyard, because that was the beginning of the white lung movement, right?
The shipyard was one of the best jobs in town. So I applied for that and was lucky to get it.
Which shipyard?
Bethlehem Key Highway.
Okay.
I was an outside machinist. Outside machinists fix things off the vessel that couldn't be fixed on the vessel. And I worked there quite a while.
What year did you start?
I believe it was 79.
Okay. And had you had training as a machinist before that?
I hadn't had training as a machinist per se, like a apprenticeship or anything, but I did have some kind of schooling, and I did have experience at different machine operation tasks. So that allowed me to start at a low-level task and work my way up.
Okay. And so you a native of Baltimore?
No, I was born in Norman, Oklahoma.
Okay. And how'd you get to Baltimore?
I traveled around through the country for quite a while, and I was living in New York, and there were some jobs in Baltimore, as there are a lot, with the shipyard and stuff, so I came down here to get a job.
All right. So what was the white lung? What were the working conditions like at the shipyard?
Well, when I first started at the shipyard, it was just wide open. You worked at your own peril. There was no safety organization, there was no union organization. There wasn't anything, it was just, you just tried to stay out of harm's way the best you could. And as I worked there, there was others that I talked to, and we were all concerned about our livelihood. And we decided to try to compromise on certain things, that corral some of the most outrageous problems, and make things a little better for our lives. And so that began our working together. And so starting to work together around those basic things, we decided to work together around other things, and pretty soon it became a very formalized action, and then eventually an organization grew to enforce that and to maintain it.
Was the shipyard unionized?
No, not when I started. No.
Okay. So did you organize a union as part of this?
I participated in the union organization. I didn't lead it or anything.
Yeah. And when did that happen?
Let's see, I believe that started in '83.
Because some of the other shipyards have been organized.
Right. No, there were other organized, and we took heart with that. Tried to emulate those and unify with them.
Joined the same union, the shipbuilders?
Right.
Office down on Fort Avenue.
Right.
Okay. Well, was health and safety an issue?
It was an issue, yeah. It wasn't the major issue, but it was an important issue, yeah.
So how did you get involved in the safety stuff? The health stuff that white lung is.
Right. Yeah. The health stuff was the disease problems. The safety stuff was the immediate problems of something falling on you, or cutting off your foot, or this or that. So there are two distinct kind of problems for your health.
Well, how did you get involved in the safety stuff? That's what I'm interested in. The health stuff, I'm sorry.
The health stuff we were all involved in, kind of as you signed up. You also became involved in the health stuff because you were told about the health problems, and you were warned to watch for certain things, certain aspects of the health problems that would develop. So you became conscious of the health problems early because of those warnings. And then because you were always conscious about looking for any health problems starting, you became more and more conscious about the health problems, till finally it became a major item in your thinking.
And what kind of health problems did they warn you about?
Well, there was the lung disease, that was the main one. But there was also things like accidents, getting your foot cut off or hand snipped or something like that.
Well, those are the obvious kind of safety stuff that you just talked about. The health stuff is more difficult and longer lasting.
Right, that was the disease aspect of it.
Yeah. And so did Bethlehem SHIP tell you about those when you started?
No, not about the disease. That really wasn't discussed except in the union.
Okay. And so how did those discussions come up?
There were items on the union agenda.
Okay. And were there people who were suffering from asbestosis, for example?
Yes, and dying from it.
Okay.
And the union made a point of that, especially as the persons became too ill to participate or passed away. That would be brought up in the meeting.
And how were you exposed to asbestos?
Well, you were exposed to asbestos just being there, because when we first started, the asbestos contamination was widespread and pretty much total in the environment. So just being there, you were breathing it.
And where was it used?
Well, the asbestos was used as a packing in almost all the aspects of the shipyard structure. It was also used as a fire retardant within divisions within the shipyard. And actually, the asbestos was, when you think about it, it was pretty commonly used throughout the shipyard in all kinds of different ways. It was a fiber, so it could be built upon, molded, woven into. It could be utilized in the structure in so many different ways that it was very lucrative to use it. I mean, because without thinking about the health condition.
Mm-hmm. Well, what kind of structures, for example, would you weave it into?
It would be woven into the structure of the the structure of the you know, the whole thing, the physical stature of the being itself.
Okay.
And it would be part of the frame. It would be woven into the joints, into the muscles of the body of the structure.
And so was most of your work inside or outside?
Most of my work was outside.
But even there, asbestos was a problem.
Oh yeah. It was totally within the atmosphere. And of course, every time you came close to any one of the structures, it was totally embedded in the structure itself. So anytime you got close to the structure or went into a structure, you got a good dose of it.
So what got you interested then in the white lung project of itself?
Well, first it wasn't white lung. First it was just we were concerned about our health. And first we were just kind of concerned about our health. Then as we began paying more attention to it, we noticed that people were dying. And it became a more specific problem. And as it became a more specific problem, it gathered everyone's attention. Eventually it got its own jurisdiction, and then eventually its own name. And the first name, I think, was, I can't remember the first name, but eventually it evolved to white lung.
Mm-hmm. Within the union structure at this point.
Right.
And approximately how many people were working at Bethlehem SHIP in the late 70s, early 80s?
It was over 400 total. There was 3 shifts because it worked 24 hours a day. And there was quite a few people that were off ill, and so they had to be replaced. It seems like a lot of people for that amount, but actually taking into account all the people that were disabled and missing and out of action, really we just barely made it with 400.
And up to this point, did Bethlehem SHIP take any responsibility for them?
No. As a matter of fact, they did everything they could to kind of deny that it was going on or to lead us in another direction or talk about a different topic. They really tried to change the point of attention.
Did you have any contact at this time with the people at Sparrows Point? We're just starting to get into a...
Well, we had heard about what they were doing. They had heard about what we were doing. We had no representative interchange at that time.
Mm-hmm. Did you guys at this point ever go outside to look at somebody like Peter Angelos or Peter T. Nichol?
At that time, we didn't really realize about them.
Okay.
We didn't know. We weren't sure what to do. We didn't really even have a defense or a protection organized. We were just that ignorant of the whole situation.
And so how did you develop this organization then to protect yourselves?
Well, first it started with just a very minor agreement amongst ourselves to be careful. And then as that became widespread amongst everyone, you know, everyone was careful, then we said, well, we can do more than be careful. You know, we eventually evolved to preventing it as a group. And we realized we had strength as a group. And we began to utilize that.
And how did you change things at the shipyard then?
Well, first, where it was wide open, anything goes, and we began to narrow it down to certain expressions, certain limited actions, and then we began to get our own policies established. And slowly but surely we built unity amongst ourselves. The more unity we had, the harder it was for them to bring in these problematic and harmful other aspects. And so we clinched around that to protect ourselves. And in doing so, got it more and more. And it grew, got harder and harder. And eventually we were able to defend ourselves quite well.
Mm-hmm. Well, when did the White Lung Association take on a standing of its own?
It was formed in '79. I'd say by '83 it was standing up by itself independently.
But within the union, or separately?
'83 it was both in the union then separately.
Okay.
'79 it was separate.
Okay. And did you find then people from other workplaces coming to you?
Well, actually, at first we came to them.
Okay.
We sought them out, talked about the unity that we had with our problems, and asked them to join with us in like-minded activities.
And did you have to explain to them what asbestosis was doing?
Yes, yes. Widespread ignorance, just like it had with ourselves, was with everyone else.
And was there anybody outside the shipyard who was helping with this?
Well, the national health organizations didn't help specifically, but in their actions to promote health and to talk about health, they gave a background that we could operate in, and so in that respect was very helpful.
Mm-hmm. But there was nobody local, no medical people or nurses or...
There was a doctor and there were some nurses, yeah, that worked with us, yes. That came over from the hospital to work with us on a like sporadic basis. You know, not constantly, but they would come, say, on Saturday afternoon.
Okay.
You know, they would do their good deed, you know.
And what would they do? Do checkups?
They would do checkups, yeah.
At the shipyard?
And they would do education.
Okay. And where would you do these?
We would do them around where we were located.
At the Union Hall or in?
Yeah, at the Union Hall.
Okay. Who was the doctor? It wasn't Jim Keogh, was it?
Later on it was Keogh. In the beginning it was another fellow, I can't remember his name, but there was a fellow before Keogh that started things going and gave us quite a bit of support. I mean, relatively for that time, quite a bit of support.
And how did you finance this organization?
Well, there wasn't much financing. It mostly came out of our pockets, and we didn't have much pockets, so there was very little financing. That's why there wasn't very much of a movement.
And so the nurses would come in, for example, and they would check somebody, and if they found lung problems, what would you do?
All they would do is tell us. Then it was up to us to do something. Unfortunately, there wasn't much that we knew to do, so basically we just died with knowledge. And so as that process went on, we became more educated and eventually defended ourselves better.
And how?
By not exposing ourselves, by keeping knowledge about what was going on. Every new aspect was educated. So we tried to be firmly convinced of our position amongst ourselves.
Did you try filing workers' compensation claims?
Oh yes. Most of those failed, though. In those days, they were just automatically rejected. Workers' compensation was very difficult to achieve if you were outside of the normal things. You got a finger cut off, workers' compensation would talk to you, but any disease aspect, workers' compensation didn't want to touch that at all.
And so how did you move the organization forward?
Well, we started making a list of the individuals that were sick, and then use that to educate everyone to the extent of the sickness, until finally everyone realized that this sickness was much more than the individual problems, the individual hands getting cut off, because this was such widespread and it was affecting everyone's health. So then we band together to prevent it. And because it was so widespread, we had to band together in a widespread way, and that helped us. Because we were a reflection of the problem, we became very large and influential ourselves.
Okay. And who else besides shipyard workers then came in? Anybody?
There were some other aircraft workers, auto workers. There were some other smaller groups, individuals, but those were the main groupings.
And then did their families participate?
Sometimes the families did participate, because sometimes the wives worked too, so they participated on the basis of their work, and as did the children. And then other times the families were just close to the workers and following along with what they did, trying to support it and things like that.
There was no families who came because the asbestos was taken into someone's house and spread?
Not in those days. There probably was, but we didn't realize it.
Okay.
We didn't realize that till far later in the development of the problem.
Okay. And so you're still working at the shipyard all along?
Right.
At some point, did you leave the shipyard and work on this full time?
Yes. Yeah.
Well, tell us about that.
Well, eventually it got to the point where I just didn't have time to work at the shipyard anymore, and that there was enough, it was robust enough problem that I could leave the shipyard and still survive.
And when was this? What year?
It's probably 84.
So really within a year or so, this organization grew enough that you could
begin
work full time on it.
Begin to work full
Yeah,
time.
okay.
Yeah.
And so what did you do then as a full-time staff person for the White Lung?
Well, there was, first of all, there was all the normal stuff. Things you had to check on, keep track of, report about. Then there was this specific problems that would jump up that you had to identify and corral in some way. And then there was the problems that would develop that you would have to unravel and try to correct.
For example?
Well, there was a problem of how the items were presented, and whether they were presented in a combined way, which they were all consolidated, or whether they were presented singularly, where they could each be inspected and understood. And we were struggling to present them in a singular way. And eventually we were successful in that. And that was how we were able to identify the different problems and explain it to people, show people what it was like. At first it had to be unraveled.
And the problems would be what, shortness of breath or?
Shortness of breath is one of the major problems, but stunted growth as a result of shortness of breath, lung infections, inability to exercise and be healthy. These were all kind of combined related problems.
And so where were you, did you have a separate office then in 84, 85?
No, not in that. We didn't have a separate office till I believe 87. But we had kind of a little camp that we all went to and, you know, interchanged information. It wasn't strong enough to be an office, that is, we couldn't all stay there safely, but we could gather together quickly and interchange information.
And where was this camp?
There were different places. It was, you know, it would be presented wherever we could all get together.
Okay. Sometimes a restaurant or a
Right.
bar or...
Right. Or just out on the street around the corner, you know.
Okay.
Anywhere we could gather together and exchange information amongst ourselves.
Yeah. Well, at some point then, did the city get involved in this?
Well, it's interesting. They try to get involved in a couple of different ways. First, they try to get involved by stopping it.
Okay.
And when they saw they couldn't do that,
Well, how did they try to stop you?
they just tried to remove our ability to operate and to stop us or to hush us from speaking about it.
And who was involved? Who was the person making these moves?
I don't know of any particular name, but there was a variety of individuals that they sent to oppose us and to try to stop us. But we were fortunate that by that time we were all together. So we were really pretty strong. We were able to overcome them one by one as they came for us. So luckily, none of them were successful.
Mm-hmm. Who was the mayor at the time? Schaefer in there then by this time?
It was the person before Schaefer. I can't remember their name.
Right. That was before my time too. So did Schaefer get involved in this at all when he became mayor?
In a superficial way, in such a way as they always would, you know, in order to cover their own butt, but not in any way to help us or to really build it or anything like that. More just to use it as their own expression. Try to take it over.
Mm-hmm. So by the late 80s then, did you have lots of material? Trying to look at some of the stuff that you've donated to the library.
Yeah. In the late 80s we had accumulated a great deal of material. Because we'd had a great deal of experience, we had talked with other groups, we'd exchanged information. Actually, by the late 80s, we'd gone on the internet, and then we were exposed to tremendous amounts of information.
So were there other groups like this in other cities?
There were.
For example?
Well, none of them were as, you know, well known as ourselves, but there was always some kind of little reaction group, some kind of self-defense group, some group that was realizing that they were dying and trying to prevent their own death. Mm-hmm. More of a self-defense kind of thing than an active movement to change it.
So would they come to Baltimore and visit, or would you go see them?
We would go see them. We would invite them to come. Some of them came too at our invitation.
Okay. And so when you became a larger organization, what then did you try to do politically, through negotiations in the shipyards, or what?
Yes. At first, every time we tried, we were crushed because we were small.
And tried what?
We tried to get the harmful aspects removed, tried to get our positions protected. But eventually we got 2 or 3 little things. We built on that. And eventually we got very major things. We were protected and eventually pretty strong. Mm-hmm. So strong they couldn't remove us. And then we were kind of like a tack in their shoe, you know.
Did OSHA get involved?
Just in the most superficial manner and the most, really, they could have done so much. And we begged them to do things, but they were very conservative, very laid back, not wanting to be involved hardly at all. I mean, outside of their formal manner. It was that was one of the most disappointing factors.
Because they were more interested in safety stuff, the obvious physical.
Right, and they had their own clear-cut things they wanted to do, and they weren't going to move off those things, you know.
And the asbestos manufacturers like Johns Manville were politically powerful.
Oh, very powerful, tremendously powerful. Overwhelmingly, in the beginning, massively.
And how did that show up?
You couldn't do anything. Every time you tried to do something, you were, you know, outmaneuvered or crushed. Eventually we built on small little things. We broke through on small little things, and then were able to build on that and eventually overpower them.
What were some of the small things that you were able to break through on? Can you remember?
Well, on the stability of the organization,
Okay.
that was one of the most important ones, and we built on that, of course. The endurance, which gave us the long-lastingness of it, and allowed us to be around for a long period of time. I'd say those are the two main ones.
Well, did you make demands on the owners of the shipyards?
We did. Most of them were discarded, ignored, but eventually one or two were accepted, and then we built on that.
So as the organization grew then, what happened? Did it continue to expand?
Well, eventually we got big enough that we affected the way the shipyard was run.
Okay.
And once that happened, then it became different, because safety became a stable factor, which everybody was introduced to as soon as they came to work. So that changed everything from this kind of crazy atmosphere where you get your head cut off anytime you turn around, to a very protected and unified body which could last for a long time and grow. And that's how we slowly built it up.
Most of the shipyard workers were men, right?
True.
I just had an interview with a guy from Sparrows Point. He said, "Oh, you know, we didn't wear safety equipment. That was for cowards. We're men. We don't need it."
Yeah, some people did have that attitude. They promoted that attitude. They wanted people to talk like that.
So did you ever demand that the shipyard stop using asbestos?
Yes, later on we did. Not in the beginning.
And how did that go?
Well, they just rejected it at first, but eventually it got to the point where asbestos was becoming more and more disliked throughout society, and more unfavorably looked at everywhere. And so our demands then took on a much more important task at that point, and eventually they did get rid of it, you know, because, I mean, not because of us entirely, but we were helpful in getting rid of it.
Because there were other places, in New York City, for example, that guys, medical schools started studying asbestos.
Exactly. And places all over, other shipyards where people were beginning to defend their health and be against this. And so a little here, a little there became a large movement eventually.
And were you ever able to get it covered as a workers' compensation?
Not till very late in the game. Almost not worth it. But we did. And we always struggled for that. But they were adamant that they didn't want any disease within the workers' compensation mechanism. They only wanted injury. And we fought that battle hard for years.
You had said that you then traveled around the country talking to other groups?
Yes, we had we learned of other groups. We contacted them, or they contacted us. We began to see that if we could exchange information, it made us stronger. So after we exchanged information to get stronger, then we began to exchange information to promote our position. And once we did that, we realized how powerful we could be. And that helped us grow.
So did you travel around the country?
I did travel, not a lot, but I did travel to different places, and people came to visit us here.
Okay. Where did you go? You remember?
I went to San Francisco. I went to New York, New Jersey.
Now, were you talking to shipyard people or a broader group?
Both. Primarily shipyard, but then some places there weren't any shipyard, but there were disease victims. We talked to them.
All right. And so then, what happened with the White Lung Association? Did it finally finish? Or?
Yeah, it had a life. You know, it was born, it lived, it made its position and its activity, and then began to fade away and eventually expired.
When did it expire?
89, I believe.
Really? So it was a very, very short 5 or 6 year
Yeah.
span.
Oh yeah.
Okay. And then did you go back to the shipyard?
No. By that time I was in administration.
Okay. Well, what is the material you gave to the University of Baltimore?
That was all of our records, all of my notes, all of my positions, and all of the information that we had gathered.
From this 6 or 7 year period?
Right, exactly.
And you saved that for
Yes,
30
I'm
years.
tenacious saver, and I had a whole pile of it, and luckily the library was there to accept it. They were glad to get it.
But you had put it in storage, right, for years?
I had, yeah, spent a lot of money storing it. Paid off, saved it.
And what do you want people to learn from the project?
Well, first, of the importance of public health. I think that's the overriding thing. Public health is in all of our interests, and it's a fundamental aspect of our total health care. Well, that would be the main thing.
Mm-hmm. And organizing.
Organizing is important, yeah, definitely. It's the only way you can live.
So did Jim Keogh eventually help with?
He did. He helped in some limited way. He was tied up with the hospital mainly, and because of that, they limited what he could do. But he did what he could. Sometimes just coming out and being around helped us. He didn't really give us any direct treatment or anything like that, but his presence gave us help.
And credibility as far as?
Credibility, yeah.
So did you ever start doing chest x-rays or something like that, or?
We tried, but we really weren't set up. That's an expensive operation.
Mm-hmm.
We really couldn't maintain it.
And none of the hospitals was willing to?
They're all controlled, you know, by people who didn't want to know about it.
Mm-hmm.
So it was very difficult. Instead of x-rays, what we did is we had a physical test. We found that, you know, if you answer certain questions in certain ways, that almost 99% of the time, if you took an x-ray, you would get the same answer. So we used these questions instead of the x-rays. They were very inexpensive. Gave us almost the same results.
And did anybody start suing the shipyards the way they did down at Sparrows Point?
Oh yeah, they tried. Most of the cases were thrown out, were not accepted in court. You know, you can sue, but you can't unless your case is admitted in court.
Right.
It doesn't go anywhere.
Yeah.
So this, you know, the attempts, really what I call the attempts to sue, were very frequent, but almost always rejected.
Were you involved, for example, with Peter Angelos or any of the firms that are well known for asbestos?
Not anymore. Not any one more than the others. we might have had a general call to everyone, you know, which some of them picked up, some of them didn't. But we didn't work with any of them specifically because they had a position of their own that they wanted, and it was not the same as ours.
Okay. And then eventually the shipyards closed.
Yes.
In the 90s?
89, yeah.
89 or so, okay. And so you were there and you saw a lot of people leave, but they probably had asbestosis problems when they left.
Right, right. And they just bled out into the general population. And at that time we tried to say, look, you know, we need to keep track of these people, need to treat them as a group. But once the shipyard structure was gone, there was no area in which to work, you know, with these people, in the, you know, as a group. So they just bled off into society and died, you know, individually.
That's a shame.
Yeah, no, it's horrible.
Any documents that are specifically important in the collection?
It's hard to say because so many of them have an individual importance in one way or the other. None of them I can think of has an overriding importance that, you know, would represent the entire collection.
Did you ever get any media attention?
We got some negative attention, and then eventually we got a little positive attention toward the end.
What kind of negative attention?
That we shouldn't be raising this, and that this is not helpful, and you know, we're doing it for our own reasons and things like that, trying to undercut what we were saying, change it.
And this was pretty much true across the country for white lung groups?
Yes, yes, yeah, very similar throughout the country, yeah.
Okay. Then after you left this, did you keep in touch at all with the group, or did it kind of just...
We did, but eventually it faded because, you know, people went and died, and then new people weren't being recruited and trained into it. And so as the older ones died, and it just kind of drifted away.
Okay. Now, do you have white lung?
Yeah.
From working in the shipyard?
Yeah, I assume so.
Yeah.
I don't know where else I'd have got it.
Okay. And it's taken how long for that to show up?
Let's see, I was analyzed, I remember, at least 93. So
we're talking 25 years ago.
yeah, but it took it 12 or 13 years for it to develop. Maybe 15 years for it to develop.
That's very tough. Anything else you want to remember about the White Lung Association you want to share?
Just the fact that it, as an association, stood out for the members was very important. It had a lot to do with our ability to maintain our health, and made me a firm believer in organization.
Was yours the biggest in the country? Do you know?
I'm not sure. I think so. But
Were there other big ones that?
There were. Texas was big. New York was big. California was big.
Okay.
New Jersey, but I can't recall exactly.
You ever have like a national convention or?
No, we contacted each other individually, but we never got together in the same place, same time.
Okay. Anything else about the collection?
No, just the fact that I'm glad that it's in the library. People can look at it, take their time, read it. It's all there, so I'm thankful that it's preserved.
Okay, great. All right, thank you.